Father Peter Cameron, in one of his editorials in the Magnificat, writes about the way we look at the trying circumstances in our lives. He says, one of our big temptations in life is to think that our circumstances are against us. We presume that the reason we are not happy is because we have been saddled with circumstances that make happiness impossible. Circumstances that conspire against us. But then I wonder, how is it that someone like St. Paul can say, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and constraints for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I think St. Paul is content with hardships because he recognizes that the trying circumstances in his life are not obstacles in his path. Instead, he realizes they are the very way that God calls him to himself. The 18th century spiritual master, Father Jean-Pierre de Caussade, tells us, the life of faith is the untiring pursuit of God through all that disguises and disfigures him, and as it were, destroys and annihilates him. You are seeking for secret ways of belonging to God, but there is only one way, making use of whatever he offers you. Everything leads you to this union with him. I think what he is saying, and what St. Paul understands, is that our lives are not just things to put up with. We fool ourselves if we think that peace and contentment will come if we just figure out how to improve our circumstances once and for all. The trying circumstances can be awakenings that challenge and educate us. And that's the way we choose to deal with them. And the way that we choose to deal with them reveals to us and to others just who Jesus Christ is for us. You see, our troubles actually call us back to God's presence. For only God's presence makes the circumstances we fear change. Only the trust that God is completely and utterly for us will keep us going. When we read the gospel stories surrounding the birth of Jesus, it becomes very clear how much Mary put her trust in God with every circumstance that arose. We see in this gospel passage today how great her confidence in God must have been when she received notice from St. Joseph that they were to flee with the child to Egypt. On that very night, she undertook the long journey to a strange and unknown country without provisions, without money, accompanied only by her infant son and her poor spouse. St. Paul startles us again by saying that we are saved by hope because the basis of our hope is the loving power of God. Why? Again, we depend upon God and not ourselves. With the aid of His grace, we can do all things. And grace is never lacking to a person of good will. In the midst of our difficulties and temptations, it's consoling to know that when our will joins with grace, it forms a combination that cannot be overcome. It has been said that God's grace, united to a person's good will, constitutes a majority in any situation. When we entrust the circumstances of our lives to God's grace, we find that we are wonderfully liberated from ourselves. We float on the waves of God's providence like a cork on the ocean. We grow in hope by first learning to see God in all things, and then later learning to see all things in God. who is both the center of our lives and the circumstances that surround us, the beginning and the end. St. Teresa advises us when she says, "Contemplate God and be at peace." At the shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., there is this beautiful bronze statue of the Holy Family entitled "The Flight into Egypt." The sculptor has captured the family at a moment of rest, and they are utterly exhausted from this long journey, and from the threat of death from which they have escaped, and from the anticipation of reaching their destination, and from the harsh desert surroundings. The donkey looks as if it has literally collapsed on the spot and has suddenly become a bedrock for Mary and the child to sit upon. Joseph is leaning against Mary's leg. He's resting his head on his knees, still holding in his hand his shepherd's staff. Mary and the child Jesus look parched with thirst, and their faces have this shimmer to them that allows you to virtually sense the sweat on their skin and the fatigue in their bones. But one does not sense despair at all in this sculpture. It radiates hope, because all the faces, including the donkey, have a serenity to them which only comes with grace. But the most compelling characteristic about the sculpture is Mary's face. She sits there holding her face up to the sun, and there seems to be both a consent and a surrender in her expression. It is a consent of faith, the same one she has made countless times before, in every moment of her life. That acceptance of the present moment that says, "Do with me whatever you want." And there is that look of total surrender in hope that follows and grows out of her faith, which says, "All will be well. All will be well." It's no surprise that this statue of the flight into Egypt is visited by countless people who come to that shrine, because the bronze on Mary's foot has been slightly worn away by thousands and thousands of hands that have touched it, hands of people who are in need of hope. The virtue of hope, which stands midway between presumption and despair, is the gift that we ask of Our Lady of Perpetual Help today. With her help, we shall conduct our lives on the assumption that to those who love God, all things work together for good.